She was a mistake. Claire Bennett stopped outside the council chamber, as if the words had turned the stone beneath her feet to ice. Through the heavy oak doors, Alpha King Nathaniel Cross continued speaking, his deep voice calm enough to make the sentence hurt even more. Claire had not meant to listen. A palace attendant had delivered a message saying Nathaniel wanted her near the eastern corridor after midnight. She had come without hesitation because, for the last 6 months, that was what she always did when the king summoned her. Inside, another man spoke. Then you agree she cannot remain in the palace? Claire held her breath. There was a pause before Nathaniel answered. Not after tonight. Something inside her went painfully quiet. For months, Claire had endured the whispers that followed an Omega through royal halls. Some called her fortunate. Others called her ambitious. A few wondered openly what someone like her could possibly offer an Alpha King. Nathaniel had never joined them, but he had never truly answered them either. He protected her without explaining why. He made decisions about her safety without asking what she wanted. He brought her into Blackwood Palace, gave her a room near the royal wing, and expected her to trust that his silence meant something better than rejection. Now she finally had her answer. Claire stepped backward before anyone could open the doors. She walked through the sleeping palace without running. She would not give the guards a reason to stop her. She would not cry where anyone could see. Inside her room, moonlight stretched across the bed she had never fully considered her own. On the table rested the silver royal badge Nathaniel had given her when she first arrived. He had told her it meant every gate in Blackwood would open for her. Claire picked it up and remembered asking him what she was supposed to be here. His answer had been the same answer he gave whenever she came too close to the truth. Safe. She understood now that safe was not the same as wanted. Claire placed the badge carefully in the center of the table. She packed only what belonged to her: 2 dresses, a wool coat, a small amount of money, and the leather journal she had carried since before Nathaniel knew her name. She left every royal gift behind. At the servants' entrance, an older guard looked at her traveling bag. Miss Bennett, it is almost 2 in the morning. I know. Does the king know you are leaving? Claire looked back once toward the distant towers. He made his position clear. The guard hesitated, but the royal badge still appeared on the travel authorization issued earlier that month. He opened the gate. Cold night air met her face as Claire stepped beyond the palace walls. She chose the northern road instead of the main highway, knowing royal patrols rarely used the old route through Greyhaven. Behind her, Blackwood Palace disappeared slowly into the darkness. She did not know that, less than 20 minutes later, Nathaniel would enter her room, carrying documents meant to explain everything. She did not know he would see the silver badge on the table and understand immediately what she had heard. And she could not know that the sentence she had walked away from had never ended where she thought it did. Because inside the council chamber, Nathaniel's full words had been, "Bringing Claire into this palace before I knew who was watching her was a mistake. Not after tonight. She cannot remain exposed for another hour." But by then, Claire was already miles away, disappearing into the darkness, while someone inside Blackwood Palace quietly received confirmation that the Omega had done exactly what they wanted. Nathaniel knew something was wrong before he reached Claire's room. The corridor was too quiet, and the guard outside her door was missing because Claire had dismissed him earlier that evening. Nathaniel pushed the door open and found darkness, an untouched bed, and an empty wardrobe. Then he saw the silver badge resting in the center of the table. For several seconds, the Alpha King simply stared at it. He had given Claire that badge personally. She had carried it every day since arriving at Blackwood Palace. Leaving it behind was not an accident. It was an answer. Nathaniel crossed the room and picked it up. "When did she leave?" he asked as soon as the night guard arrived. "Approximately 20 minutes ago, Your Majesty." "Which gate?" "The servants' entrance." Nathaniel turned sharply. Why was she allowed through? The guard swallowed. Her travel authorization was still valid. "She said you had made your position clear." Nathaniel closed his eyes for one brief moment. Claire had heard him. But how? The Eastern Council corridor had been restricted during the meeting. No one should have sent her there. Who told her to come to the council wing tonight? The guard looked confused. "I do not know, Your Majesty." Nathaniel immediately summoned his chief secretary, Rebecca Sloan. She arrived carrying the palace communication ledger. There was no official message requesting Claire's presence. No order from Nathaniel. No instruction from the council. Someone had deliberately brought her close enough to hear a conversation never intended for her. Find every attendant assigned to the eastern corridor tonight, Nathaniel ordered. Quietly. No public alarm. Rebecca nodded. And Miss Bennet? Nathaniel looked toward the open wardrobe. Claire had taken almost nothing. That worried him more than if she had packed everything. She had not planned a journey. She had escaped a place she believed no longer wanted her. Which road did she take? Minutes later, a gatekeeper confirmed that Claire had turned north. Nathaniel unfolded a regional map across the table. The main northern highway was heavily patrolled, but Claire knew the palace routes well enough to avoid it. His finger moved toward the older road through Greyhaven. Councilman Marcus Vale entered without waiting to be announced. I heard the Omega has left. Nathaniel slowly looked up. That information has not been released. Marcus paused. Only for a fraction of a second, but Nathaniel noticed. Palace servants talk. Not this quickly. Marcus recovered with a calm smile. Perhaps her departure solves the problem. If she chose to leave, there is no reason to bring her back. Nathaniel folded the map. You misunderstand me. Claire is not property to be brought back. Then let her go. Nathaniel stepped closer. Someone sent her to that corridor tonight. Marcus's expression remained neutral. And you believe that matters? I believe everything that happens inside my palace matters. Marcus inclined his head and left, but Nathaniel watched him until the door closed. Something about the timing was wrong. Claire had been watched for weeks. Reports concerning her movements had appeared in council discussions before Nathaniel requested them. That was why he had planned to move her somewhere safer before sunrise. Now the person monitoring her had accomplished something far more useful. Claire had removed herself from royal protection. Nathaniel ordered 2 trusted scouts to search the northern roads, but he gave one condition. Do not approach her. Do not frighten her. Find her and report back. Rebecca studied him. You are not going yourself? If she sees royal riders tonight, she will believe I sent them to force her home. He looked down at the badge in his hand. For 6 months, Nathaniel had believed keeping Claire uninformed was the safest choice. Standing inside her empty room, he finally understood what his silence had cost. 30 miles north, Claire reached the first weathered sign marking the road to Greyhaven just as the horizon began turning pale. She was exhausted, cold, and uncertain where she would sleep the next night, but she kept walking. Then she noticed something strange nailed beneath the village sign. A small white ribbon marked with a faded crescent symbol. Claire had seen that symbol before. It appeared on a document she had accidentally discovered in Nathaniel's study 3 weeks earlier, beside a list of Omega names that officially did not exist. Claire stood beneath the Greyhaven sign, staring at the white ribbon as dawn spread across the empty road. The crescent symbol was unmistakable. 3 weeks earlier, she had entered Nathaniel's study to return a book and found a document lying beneath an open map. She had seen only a few lines before Nathaniel appeared and quietly closed the folder. 12 Omega names. No pack affiliations. No current addresses. Each marked with the same crescent. When Claire asked what the list meant, Nathaniel had answered with the word he used whenever he wanted to end a conversation. Nothing you need to worry about. Now one of those symbols was tied to a road 30 miles from Blackwood Palace. Claire touched the ribbon, then noticed another one farther ahead, fastened to a fence post. She followed the markers into Greyhaven. The village was smaller than she expected, with weathered houses surrounding an old mill and a narrow main street beginning to wake beneath the morning light. Claire entered a modest diner near the town square and ordered coffee and toast with the little money she had brought. The woman behind the counter looked at Claire's traveling bag, then at her face. You came from Blackwood? Claire hesitated. Why would you think that? Your coat. Claire looked down. She had forgotten the inner lining carried the subtle silver stitching used by palace tailors. I worked there for a while. The woman placed the coffee in front of her. Then you should be careful asking questions here. Claire slowly looked up. I have not asked any. Not yet. The woman introduced herself as Helen Ward and lowered her voice. People who arrive from the capital usually want records. People here learned a long time ago that records do not always tell the truth. Claire remembered the list. Do you know what the crescent symbol means? Helen's expression changed. She turned the sign on the diner door from open to closed. Where did you see it? Outside the village. Helen studied Claire before walking toward a back room. Come with me. Claire followed her through a narrow hallway into a small community kitchen. 6 women were preparing breakfast around a wooden table. Claire stopped. She recognized one of them immediately, not personally, but from Nathaniel's document. Laura Mills. According to the list Claire had seen, Laura had disappeared 2 years earlier after voluntarily leaving her pack. Yet she was standing 10 feet away, alive and clearly not missing. Laura noticed Claire staring. Have we met? No, Claire said carefully. But I have seen your name. The room became silent. Helen closed the door behind them. Where? Claire understood that the wrong answer could end the conversation. In the Alpha King's study. Laura's face tightened. Then he knows. Knows what? Laura looked around the table. That none of us left voluntarily. Claire felt the meaning settle over her. One woman explained that official documents claimed she had relocated west. Another had supposedly requested separation from her pack. Each story was different, but the result was the same. Their names had been removed from local records after they challenged officials controlling housing, employment, or travel permissions. Greyhaven had become an unofficial refuge for people erased by paperwork rather than physically missing. Claire reached into her journal and wrote down the names she remembered from Nathaniel's list. Laura leaned closer. Where did you get those? I saw them once. Every person on that page came through here. Claire looked at her. Every person? Laura nodded. And someone in Blackwood has been searching for this place. Claire thought about the false message that had brought her to the council corridor, the conversation she had overheard, and the symbol waiting on the road she happened to choose. Suddenly, her escape no longer felt entirely like her own decision. Outside, a horse stopped near the diner. Helen moved toward the window and looked through the curtain. Royal Scout. Claire's stomach tightened. Nathaniel had found her faster than she expected. But the rider did not approach the building. He simply observed the street before turning away, exactly as someone under strict orders not to interfere would do. Claire watched him disappear. For the first time since leaving Blackwood, she wondered whether Nathaniel was searching for her because he wanted her returned or because he knew something she did not. Then Laura pointed toward the names in Claire's journal. There is one more thing you should know. Claire turned back. Laura's voice dropped. Your name was added to the list 2 months ago. Claire stared at Laura. My name. Laura nodded and pulled a folded sheet from a locked drawer beneath the kitchen counter. 2 months ago, someone from the regional records office came through Greyhaven asking whether Claire Bennett had been seen here. Claire felt a cold certainty settle over her. I had never been to Greyhaven before today. That is why we remembered you. Helen placed the paper on the table. Claire recognized the crescent symbol immediately, but another detail caught her attention. Beside her name was a date scheduled 3 days from now. What does that mean? Laura shook her head. We do not know. Dates appeared beside our names before our records changed. Claire thought about Nathaniel's guarded behavior during the past several weeks. His increased security. The questions he refused to answer. The meeting she had overheard. For the first time, the pieces formed a different picture. Back at Blackwood Palace, Nathaniel stood before the council with Claire's silver badge still in his hand. Her name was added to the restricted movement registry 8 weeks ago, Rebecca Sloan reported. The authorization came through Councilman Vale's office. Marcus remained perfectly calm. That registry exists for individuals requiring additional protection. Nathaniel placed a document on the table, then explained why 11 Omega women on the same registry were officially recorded as leaving their packs voluntarily. Marcus glanced at the page. Administrative errors happen. 11 times? Nathaniel asked. No one answered. He looked across the council. Last night, I said bringing Claire into this palace before identifying who was monitoring her was a mistake. Someone made certain she heard only enough to believe I meant her. Marcus leaned back. Perhaps she heard exactly what she needed to hear. Nathaniel's gaze hardened. And perhaps you know more about her departure than you should. Hours later, the scout returned from Greyhaven and confirmed Claire was safe. Nathaniel felt relief. But the report contained something unexpected. Claire had entered a building associated with several Omegas listed as missing or voluntarily relocated. He immediately understood why someone might have wanted her outside Blackwood. If Claire disappeared into the same system as the others, her departure could later be explained as another voluntary choice. But whoever arranged the council message had miscalculated. Claire had reached the one place where the records could be disproved. In Greyhaven, Claire examined the document again. If my record was already prepared to change, leaving the palace made their story easier. Helen nodded. A woman walks away in the middle of the night. Days later, Official records say she chose a new life somewhere else. Most people stop asking questions. Claire looked toward the window. Nathaniel's scout was gone, but she now understood why he had not approached her. If Nathaniel wanted to force her back, one rider would not have been enough. He had sent someone only to confirm she was safe. That realization did not erase the pain of the previous night. Even if she had misunderstood his words, she had not imagined 6 months of being protected without being trusted. Nathaniel had kept information from her while expecting complete faith in return. Claire folded the document. I need to know who created these records. Laura studied her. That information is in Blackwood. Then we find another way to reach it. Before anyone could answer, the front bell of the diner rang. Helen went still. A moment later, a young messenger entered the kitchen carrying a sealed envelope. For Claire Bennett. Claire did not recognize him. Who sent it? No name. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sentence written in black ink. If the king finds you, the people of Greyhaven will disappear again. Claire read it twice. Laura's face lost color. They know you are here. Claire looked toward the road and made a decision. Then I cannot stay here. Helen stepped forward. Where will you go? Claire picked up her bag. Somewhere they expect me even less. At that same moment, Nathaniel was studying the same crescent symbol in his private office when Rebecca entered with a message intercepted at the northern checkpoint. She placed it before him. Nathaniel read the threat sent to Claire and immediately understood the purpose. Someone was not merely trying to frighten her. They were trying to keep her moving, isolated, and impossible to protect. Nathaniel looked toward the map of Greyhaven. Prepare no royal escort. Rebecca frowned. Then how will you bring her back? Nathaniel folded the message. I am not bringing her back. He reached for his coat. I am going to tell her the truth, and for once, I am going to let Claire decide what happens next. Claire left Greyhaven before noon, but she did not travel far. Instead of taking the northern highway, she followed an old farm road to an abandoned meeting house 3 miles outside the village. Helen had given her the key and promised that only a handful of people knew the building still existed. Claire spent the afternoon studying the names she had copied into her journal. 12 Omegas, including herself. Different towns, different packs, different circumstances. Yet every record followed the same pattern. First came increased monitoring. Then a crescent mark appeared beside the name. Finally, the person was officially listed as having left voluntarily. Claire drew a line between the dates and noticed something she had missed before. The changes happened shortly before regional council votes involving housing rights, employment access, or independent travel for Omegas. These women had not been selected randomly. Each had questioned someone with authority. Claire remembered why her own name might have appeared. 2 months earlier, she had challenged Councilman Marcus Vale during a palace reception after hearing him describe unclaimed Omegas as a burden on pack resources. She had asked, in front of several officials, why the kingdom tracked their movements more carefully than their complaints. Marcus had smiled at her then. She remembered the exact words. Curiosity can become expensive in places you do not understand. At the time, Nathaniel had ended the conversation and moved Claire away without explanation. Now she wondered whether that was the moment everything began. Near sunset, Helen arrived with Laura and 3 other women carrying boxes of old documents. We kept everything, Laura said. Travel notices, employment cancellations, housing records. We never knew how they connected. Claire spread the papers across several tables. One pattern appeared again and again. Every altered record passed through the Central Movement Office before reaching local pack authorities. That office answered directly to Marcus Vale. Claire felt the anger beneath her fear become something clearer. Purpose. He did not erase people because they disappeared, she said. He made them disappear on paper so no one would believe them when they spoke. Helen looked toward the documents. Can the king prove that? Claire thought of Nathaniel. Maybe, but I am not giving him this until I understand what he knew. A knock sounded at the meeting house door. Everyone froze. Laura moved toward the back exit, but Claire raised one hand. The knock came again, slow and deliberate. Claire, a familiar voice called from outside. Nathaniel. Her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. For one dangerous second, she remembered the safety of Blackwood, the quiet evenings in the library, and every moment she had mistaken his attention for trust. Then she remembered the empty spaces where answers should have been. Claire opened the door, but remained inside. Nathaniel stood alone beneath the fading light. No guards. No royal carriage. No visible symbol of command beyond the authority he carried naturally. His eyes found hers, and relief crossed his face before he controlled it. "You are safe." Claire almost laughed. "That seems to be the only thing you ever wanted me to be." The words landed harder than anger. Nathaniel did not defend himself. "You heard me last night." "I heard enough." "No," he said quietly. "You heard the part someone wanted you to hear." Claire's expression changed, but she did not step aside. Nathaniel continued. "I said bringing you into Blackwood before I knew who was watching you was a mistake. I was arranging to move you somewhere protected before sunrise." "Without telling me?" "Yes." "Without asking me?" Nathaniel held her gaze. "Yes." Claire nodded slowly. "Then I misunderstood one sentence." "I did not misunderstand everything." Nathaniel had prepared explanations during the entire journey. None of them survived that answer. Claire stepped outside and closed the door behind her so the others could not be seen. "My name was added to a registry 2 months ago. Did you know? I learned the full details after you left. But you knew someone was watching me." "Yes." "And you decided I could not handle the truth." Nathaniel looked away for the first time. "I decided I could protect you from it." Claire's voice softened, making the words even sharper. "Those are not the same thing." Silence settled between them as daylight disappeared over Greyhaven. Nathaniel finally understood that finding Claire would not repair what had broken. Before he could answer, the meeting house door opened behind her. Laura stepped outside holding one of the altered records. She looked directly at the Alpha King. "If you truly came to tell her the truth, Your Majesty, then perhaps you should start by explaining why your council has been erasing people like us for years." Nathaniel looked at the record in Laura's hand, then at the women standing behind Claire. "I cannot explain what I was never shown." Laura gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "That is convenient. It is also the truth." Claire watched him carefully. "Then prove it." Nathaniel stepped inside the meeting house without asking anyone to trust him. The tables were covered with years of altered travel notices, canceled employment records, housing removals, and official declarations claiming women had voluntarily abandoned their packs. He examined each document slowly. The deeper he went, the quieter he became. "These authorization numbers should have appeared in the royal quarterly reports," he said. "They did not." Claire placed her journal beside him. "Every alteration passed through the Central Movement Office." Nathaniel looked at the repeated signatures. "Marcus Vale." "His office," Claire corrected. "We do not know yet who personally approved each change." Nathaniel glanced at her, recognizing the distinction. Even now, Claire refused to accuse someone without evidence. "You found all of this in one day?" "They found it over years. I only put the pieces together." Laura studied Nathaniel. "We sent complaints to Blackwood. I never received them." "Then someone made sure you did not." Nathaniel straightened. For years, reports had reached his desk through layers of advisors he believed existed to make government more efficient. Now he saw what that system had allowed. Information could disappear long before reaching him. Claire noticed the realization in his expression. "You really did not know." Nathaniel met her eyes. "No, that does not mean you had no responsibility." The room became still. No one spoke to an Alpha King that way in public. Nathaniel could have defended himself. Instead, he nodded. "You are right." Claire had expected resistance. His answer unsettled her more than an argument would have. Nathaniel turned toward the documents. "If I take these back to Blackwood, Marcus will know immediately. And if you summon him for questioning, records could disappear," Claire said. "Then what do you suggest?" It was the first time Nathaniel had asked her that question before making a decision. Claire looked at the women around the room. "We build a timeline. We compare every altered record with council votes, regional policies, and complaints submitted before each disappearance. Then we identify who benefited." Nathaniel nodded. "I can provide access to the royal archives." Claire shook her head. "Not if accessing them alerts Marcus. There is a private archive beneath the Western Library. Only 3 people have access." "Who?" "Myself, Rebecca Sloane, and the royal archivist." Claire considered it. "Can records be copied without anyone knowing?" "Yes." Laura stepped forward. "You expect us to trust another secret room inside the palace that failed us?" Nathaniel looked directly at her. "No. I expect you to trust the evidence you verify yourself." That answer changed the atmosphere, but only slightly. Claire gathered several documents. "I am not returning to Blackwood tonight." Nathaniel's face revealed disappointment, but he did not challenge her. All right. And I am not leaving Greyhaven because someone threatened me. All right. Claire narrowed her eyes. You are agreeing very easily. I spent 6 months making decisions for you and calling it protection. I am trying something different. For the first time since he arrived, something in Claire's expression softened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Nathaniel prepared to leave before darkness made the road difficult. At the door, Claire stopped him. Nathaniel. He turned. It was the first time she had used his name since leaving the palace. The night I heard you, someone sent me there. I know. The message came through a palace attendant. Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. Do you remember who? Claire thought carefully. A young man named Evan. He worked near the Eastern Council corridor. Nathaniel went completely still. Claire, there is no attendant named Evan assigned anywhere in Blackwood Palace. Laura looked toward the windows. Claire felt the pieces shift again. The person who had delivered the message had not merely manipulated her. He had entered the royal palace under a false identity. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice controlled. Describe him. Claire did. When she finished, Nathaniel reached into his coat and removed a folded council photograph. Claire immediately pointed to a man standing 3 places behind Marcus Vale. That is him. Nathaniel looked at the name beneath the image. Thomas Reed, senior clerk of the Central Movement Office. The same office connected to every altered Omega record on the tables behind them. The name Thomas Reed changed everything. Nathaniel returned to Blackwood before midnight, carrying no Greyhaven documents and giving no indication that he had found Claire. If Thomas believed the plan had worked, Nathaniel wanted him to keep believing it. Rebecca Sloane was waiting in the private archive beneath the Western Library when he arrived. Thomas Reed has worked under Marcus Vale for 7 years, she said. He has authorization to enter administrative corridors, but not the Royal Council wing. Nathaniel placed the photograph on the table. Claire identified him as the man who sent her there. Rebecca's expression tightened. Then someone gave him access. Find out who, but do not question him. Nathaniel opened the first archive cabinet. We need him comfortable. 50 miles away, Claire sat with Laura and Helen beneath the dim lights of the meeting house, building the timeline they had discussed. The pattern became clearer with every document. One Omega had challenged a housing restriction 3 weeks before her records changed. Another had questioned missing wages. A third had attempted to testify before a regional council. Each woman became administratively invisible shortly before an important vote. Claire placed 12 names across the table. This was never about relocation. Laura nodded. It was about removing witnesses. Helen pointed toward Claire's name. Then what did you witness? Claire thought back over her months at Blackwood. Conversations overheard in hallways. Documents left briefly uncovered. Marcus warning her against curiosity. Then she remembered the reception 2 months earlier. Before confronting Marcus, she had seen Thomas Reed carrying a sealed folder into a private office. The folder bore the crescent symbol. She had mentioned it to Nathaniel later, but he had dismissed the subject and increased her security the following morning. I saw something they did not want me to remember, Claire said. The realization brought another question. If Thomas had wanted her gone, why guide her toward Greyhaven? Claire looked at the white ribbon Helen had removed from the village sign. Who placed these markers? Helen shook her head. They have been used for years to guide displaced Omegas here. Then Thomas may not have known about them. Claire understood the mistake. Whoever sent her away expected a frightened Omega to disappear quietly. Instead, she had recognized a symbol connected to the very system they were hiding. Near dawn, a discreet message arrived from Nathaniel through Rebecca. It contained no order to return, only copies of 3 archived council schedules. Claire compared the dates against the disappearances. Every altered record had been approved within 48 hours of a closed administrative meeting chaired by Marcus Vale. Laura leaned closer. That cannot be coincidence. It is not proof either, Claire said. She turned the final page and found something more important. Thomas Reed had attended every meeting. Claire wrote Nathaniel a reply with one request. Do not arrest anyone yet. At Blackwood, Nathaniel read her message twice. 6 months earlier, he would have ignored the request and acted immediately. This time, he ordered surveillance of the records office instead. By afternoon, Rebecca reported that Thomas had entered Marcus's private office carrying several archive boxes. An hour later, Marcus requested emergency authorization to destroy outdated movement records. Nathaniel denied it without explanation. That evening, another message reached Greyhaven. Claire opened it while the others watched. Nathaniel had written only one sentence. They know someone is looking. Claire looked at the tables covered with evidence. Then we stopped looking backward. Laura frowned. What does that mean? Claire picked up the list containing her own scheduled date. 3 days from now had become tomorrow. We find out what they plan to do next. At the same moment, inside Blackwood Palace, Marcus stood before Thomas Reed in the darkened records office. The king denied the destruction order. Thomas looked uneasy. Then he suspects something. Marcus turned toward the window. No, the king suspects everyone. He placed a new document on the desk. At the top was Claire Bennett's name. Beneath it, her status had already been changed. Voluntarily departed royal territory. Thomas stared at the date. That is tomorrow. Marcus calmly closed the file. By tomorrow, it will become yesterday. By sunrise, Claire had made a decision Nathaniel would never have expected from the woman who left Blackwood only 2 nights earlier. She was going back, but not to stay. Rebecca had discovered that the Central Movement Office processed status changes through a regional terminal outside the main palace records system. If Marcus intended to declare Claire gone from royal territory, the authorization would appear there first. Claire needed a copy before anyone could erase it. Nathaniel offered to retrieve the record himself. Claire refused. If the Alpha King suddenly requests my file, Marcus will know exactly what we found. And if you walk into that office, Thomas may recognize you. He already thinks I am running away. Claire looked at the plain gray coat Helen had given her. Let him keep thinking that. Nathaniel was silent for several seconds. Every instinct told him to stop her. Instead, he asked, "What do you need from me?" Claire noticed the difference. Access to the public records hall. Nothing more. By late morning, she entered the administrative district under her own name. No disguise. No royal escort. Just an Omega requesting a copy of her official travel status. The clerk behind the counter searched the system and frowned. According to this, you left royal territory yesterday. Claire remained calm. I am standing in front of you. There must be an error. Print it. The clerk hesitated. I cannot release internal records. Claire placed her identification on the counter. It is my record. After several minutes, the clerk finally handed her a certified copy. Claire read the authorization line and felt her pulse quicken. The change had been approved by Thomas Reed using an administrative code assigned to Marcus Vale's office. More importantly, the timestamp showed the document had been created before Claire ever left Blackwood Palace. Her disappearance had been prepared in advance. Outside, Nathaniel waited nearly half a mile away inside an ordinary carriage. Claire entered and handed him the document. His expression changed as he read it. This was created 6 hours before the council meeting. Before I heard what you said. Before someone sent you to that corridor. Claire nodded. They did not react to me leaving. They planned for it. Nathaniel looked toward the administrative building. I can suspend Marcus and Thomas today, and they will say Thomas acted alone or that the record was a clerical mistake. Then what do you suggest? Claire took out her journal. We connect this authorization to the others. Nathaniel looked at her. Together? Claire met his eyes. Do not confuse working together with everything being repaired. I will not. That evening, they returned separately to Greyhaven. Nathaniel entered the meeting house through the rear door after dark, carrying copies from the private royal archive. For hours, Claire, Nathaniel, Laura, and Helen compared authorization codes. The same sequence appeared across 9 altered records. Each change had been prepared before the women officially disappeared. They created the story first, Claire said. Then they pushed each woman into circumstances that made the story believable. Nathaniel looked at her own file. Including you. Claire thought about the false message, the council corridor, and the words she had misunderstood. They knew exactly where to place me. Laura pointed toward another column. Look at the dates. Every targeted Omega had received an anonymous warning shortly before leaving her original community. The wording was different, but the purpose was identical. Leave, or someone else will suffer. Nathaniel leaned back, his expression grim. Fear made the records look voluntary. Claire looked around the room at women who had spent years believing no one powerful would listen. Then their testimony is part of the evidence. Nathaniel nodded. If they choose to give it. Laura studied him for a moment before answering. That is the first correct thing I have heard a king say about us. A quiet sound came from outside. Helen moved toward the window. A messenger had left an envelope beneath the door and disappeared. Claire opened it. Inside was a formal council notice addressed to Nathaniel. Marcus Vale had called an emergency session for the following morning. The stated purpose was to investigate whether the Alpha King was allowing personal attachment to an Omega to interfere with royal judgment. Claire looked at Nathaniel. He knows you found me. Nathaniel folded the notice. More than that, he wants you to believe returning with me will destroy my authority. Claire understood immediately. Marcus was using the same weapon again. Make her feel like the problem. Make her disappear by choice. She looked down at the certified record declaring she had already left the kingdom. Then she placed it beside the council notice. Good. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Claire's voice was calm. Tomorrow, Marcus is going to explain to the entire council how an Omega who officially left the kingdom yesterday is standing directly in front of him. The emergency council session began at 9 the next morning, and Marcus Vale arrived believing Claire Bennett was still somewhere beyond Blackwood. That belief lasted exactly 4 minutes. Nathaniel entered first and took his place at the head of the long council table. Marcus immediately stood. Your Majesty, this session concerns a serious question of judgment. Your personal involvement with an Omega has created instability within the palace and uncertainty throughout the council. Nathaniel remained calm. Then present your evidence. Marcus opened a folder. Claire Bennett voluntarily departed royal territory. Yet palace resources continue to be used in connection with her disappearance. Disappearance? Nathaniel asked. Your own records say she left voluntarily. Marcus hesitated. That is correct. The council chamber doors opened. Claire walked inside alone. Every conversation stopped. She wore a simple dark blue dress and carried no royal badge, no ceremonial symbol, and nothing that suggested Nathaniel had brought her there under his authority. Marcus stared at her. Thomas Reed, seated near the far wall, immediately looked down. Claire crossed the room and placed a certified document on the table. According to this record, I left royal territory yesterday. Marcus recovered quickly. Administrative records sometimes contain errors. This one was created before I left Blackwood Palace. Silence spread across the chamber. Claire continued. 6 hours before I was sent to the Eastern Corridor by a man who introduced himself as a palace attendant named Evan. Thomas shifted in his chair. Nathaniel noticed, but he said nothing. Marcus looked toward Claire. Are you accusing this council based on assumptions? No. I am asking questions based on documents. Claire placed copies of several authorization records beside her own. 9 Omegas were officially recorded as leaving voluntarily. Their status changes were prepared before they actually left their communities. Every authorization passed through the Central Movement Office. Council members began examining the pages. Marcus turned toward Nathaniel. This is exactly what I warned about. Your Majesty, you are allowing personal attachment to influence royal proceedings. Nathaniel's expression remained unreadable. Claire requested access to public records available to any citizen. She obtained the certified document herself. And these other files? Marcus demanded. Claire answered before Nathaniel could. They belonged to the women whose lives were rewritten without their consent. Marcus gave a dismissive smile. Women who are not here. The doors opened again. Laura Mills entered with Helen and 4 other Omegas from Greyhaven. Marcus's smile disappeared. Laura stepped forward. I am here. She placed her original employment record beside the altered version. Another woman did the same with a housing document. One by one, they presented evidence that contradicted the official records. Claire watched the council members begin to understand that this was larger than one Omega leaving a palace. Marcus stood abruptly. These documents require verification. Until then, this performance proves nothing. Claire looked directly at him. I agree. Marcus seemed surprised. You do? Evidence should be verified. That is why I am requesting an independent audit of every movement record processed through your office during the last 7 years. The room went completely still. Nathaniel could have ordered the audit himself, but he understood what Claire was doing. She was not asking him to rescue her argument. She was forcing the council to respond publicly. One senior councilwoman spoke first. I support the request. Another member followed. Then another. Marcus looked toward Nathaniel. You cannot permit this. Nathaniel finally leaned forward. Why would an innocent office fear an audit? Marcus had no answer. Thomas Reed suddenly stood. Councilman Vale did not create those records. Every eye turned toward him. Marcus's face changed. Thomas realized too late that he had spoken before anyone accused Marcus personally. Claire caught it immediately. I never said he did. Thomas froze. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. But apparently you know who did. Marcus pushed back his chair. This session is over. No, Claire said. She did not raise her voice, but Marcus stopped. She placed the false message that had summoned her to the council corridor beside her altered record. Someone wanted me to hear enough to leave. Someone prepared the paperwork before I made that choice. And someone expected me to disappear quietly like every woman before me. She turned toward Thomas. You were the man who delivered the message. Thomas looked toward Marcus, and that single glance told the room more than any confession could have. Nathaniel saw it. So did Claire. But instead of declaring victory, Claire gathered her documents and stepped back. The evidence had opened the door, but they still needed the truth behind it. As royal investigators secured the records office for an independent audit, Marcus left the chamber under formal suspension rather than arrest. Nathaniel approached Claire after everyone else had gone. You could have let me in that meeting in 5 minutes. Claire looked at the empty council table. Then they would have remembered what the king ordered. She turned toward him. I needed them to remember what the evidence proved. Nathaniel nodded slowly. For the first time, he was not looking at someone he needed to protect. He was looking at someone who had changed the direction of his kingdom without borrowing a single ounce of his power. Then Rebecca entered carrying a sealed archive box recovered from Thomas Reed's office. You both need to see this. Inside were dozens of unopened complaints addressed directly to the Alpha King. On top of them lay one envelope written in Claire's handwriting, dated 2 months earlier. Nathaniel stared at it. Claire did too. She had never written that letter. Claire did not touch the envelope. Her handwriting was unmistakable, but she knew every letter she had written since arriving at Blackwood, and this was not one of them. Nathaniel carefully opened it and read the first page in silence. The letter claimed Claire had discovered financial irregularities inside the Central Movement Office and feared retaliation from Marcus Vale. It requested a private meeting with the Alpha King and insisted no one else be informed. Rebecca examined the paper. If this had reached you, you would have opened an investigation immediately, which means whoever created it needed a reason to start monitoring Claire without making the real reason visible, Nathaniel said. Claire looked at the date. The letter had been written one day before Nathaniel unexpectedly increased her security. You saw this? She asked. Nathaniel shook his head. Not this letter. Marcus brought me a confidential report claiming someone was gathering information about you. Claire finally understood. He created a threat, then warned you about it. Rebecca nodded. That allowed his office to track Claire under the appearance of royal protection. Nathaniel's expression darkened with regret. And I approved the additional monitoring. Claire held his gaze. Because you thought you were protecting me. Yes. Without telling me. Nathaniel did not look away. Yes. The answer carried no excuse this time. Claire turned back to the archive box. Beneath the false letter were dozens of complaints from Omegas across the kingdom. Some described employment restrictions. Others questioned housing decisions or unexplained changes to travel status. Every envelope had been addressed to Nathaniel. None had reached him. Claire picked up one dated 5 years earlier. This system existed long before I came to Blackwood. Rebecca began sorting the letters by date. Thomas controlled administrative correspondence before becoming Marcus's senior clerk. He could intercept complaints before they reached the royal office. Nathaniel looked at the growing stacks. Then Marcus did not simply remove witnesses. He controlled what the crown was allowed to know. Claire shook her head. Not entirely. Nathaniel looked at her. What do you mean? He controlled what reached you because the system made that possible. If one clerk can hide years of complaints, the problem is larger than one corrupt office. Nathaniel absorbed the words without resistance. Then we changed the system. Claire looked at him carefully. After we prove what happened. The independent audit continued through the afternoon. Investigators found duplicate authorization codes, altered timestamps, and internal requests signed through accounts belonging to employees who had retired years earlier. But Marcus still denied direct involvement. Thomas refused to speak. Without a clear connection between them, Marcus could claim administrative negligence rather than deliberate coordination. Then Rebecca discovered a pattern hidden inside the unopened complaints. Each envelope contained a tiny processing number written in the lower corner. Claire compared the numbers with the Crescent registry. They matched. The complaints created the list, she said. Nathaniel understood immediately. Anyone who complained was marked for monitoring. Laura, standing nearby, looked through several envelopes until she found her own name. I wrote to the king 3 weeks before my housing record changed. Claire placed the letter beside Laura's altered file. This is the connection. Nathaniel called for the royal archivist, but Claire stopped him. Not yet. Why? Because Marcus knows the audit is happening. If he realizes we found the processing numbers, he will prepare an explanation. Nathaniel waited. What do you suggest? Claire looked toward the sealed council chamber across the courtyard. Give him exactly what he wants. That evening, an official announcement spread through Blackwood stating that the investigation had found administrative irregularities but no evidence directly connecting Marcus Vale to deliberate misconduct. Marcus received the news in his private residence and immediately requested permission to address the council the following morning. The request was granted. What he did not know was that Claire had written the announcement herself. Near midnight, Nathaniel found her standing in the eastern corridor where she had overheard him days earlier. You are certain about tomorrow? He asked. Claire looked toward the closed council doors. Marcus believes he survived because the evidence cannot reach him. Nathaniel stood beside her. And when he walks into that room, Claire held up the original complaint ledger recovered from Thomas's office. Every processing number had been entered under one authorization signature. Marcus Vale. Tomorrow, we let him explain the one record he cannot call a mistake. Marcus Vale entered the council chamber the next morning with the confidence of a man who believed the danger had passed. He carried a prepared statement and offered Nathaniel a respectful bow before turning toward the council. The investigation has confirmed what I maintained from the beginning. Administrative mistakes occurred, but there is no evidence of deliberate misconduct connected to my office. Claire sat quietly beside Laura and the other women from Greyhaven. Marcus noticed her, but this time he smiled. He believed her strongest evidence had already failed. These errors are regrettable, he continued, but they should not be used to damage institutions that have served this kingdom for generations. Nathaniel said nothing. Marcus looked toward him. Your Majesty, I believe it is time to restore order. I agree, Nathaniel replied. Marcus relaxed. Then Claire stood. She carried only the original complaint ledger. Councilman Vale, do you recognize this? Marcus glanced at it. No, Claire opened the ledger. Every complaint sent to the Crown received a processing number before disappearing into Thomas Reed's office. Those same numbers were later used to identify omegas placed on the Crescent Registry. Marcus shrugged. That proves misconduct by a clerk. Perhaps, Claire said. Except every processing sequence required one authorization signature. She turned the ledger toward the council. Marcus's name appeared repeatedly across the pages. His expression barely changed. Signatures can be copied. Claire nodded. That is true. Marcus seemed relieved until Rebecca entered carrying a second record, which is why we compared the signatures with the secure authorization log. Claire continued. Each approval was confirmed using your private council credentials. Marcus looked toward Nathaniel. Those credentials could have been compromised. For 7 years? Nathaniel asked. Marcus had no immediate answer. Claire stepped closer to the table. You did not erase these women because they were powerless. You erased them because they spoke. The room remained silent. You intercepted their complaints, marked their names, altered their records, and created circumstances that made their departures look voluntary. Marcus turned toward the council. This is speculation. The chamber doors opened. Thomas Reed entered beside 2 royal investigators. He looked exhausted, but calm. Marcus stared at him. Thomas avoided his eyes. Last night, Rebecca said, Thomas requested to provide a formal statement after investigators showed him the authorization logs. Marcus's confidence finally broke. You cannot trust a man trying to protect himself. Thomas looked at Claire. He is right about that. Then he faced the council. So do not trust me. Trust the records. Thomas explained how complaints were intercepted and coded, how threatening messages were used to pressure targeted omegas into leaving, and how Marcus approved the altered status records afterward. When he described the false message sent to Claire, Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Claire did not look away. Marcus turned toward her. You think this makes you important? Claire answered calmly. No, that is the difference between us. I never needed this to be about me. The council voted unanimously to remove Marcus from authority, pending a full legal investigation. Thomas was also suspended and placed under formal review for his role. No celebration followed. There were too many years to repair and too many people whose lives had been changed by records written without their consent. After the chamber emptied, Nathaniel found Claire near the window. "It is finished," he said. Claire shook her head. "Marcus is finished. The system that allowed him to do this is still here." Nathaniel looked around the council chamber. "Then help me change it." Claire turned toward him. "Do not give me a position because you feel guilty." "I was not going to." "Do not give me one because you care about me." Nathaniel held her gaze. "Then what should I do?" Claire looked toward Laura and the others waiting outside. "Listen when people speak before they have to disappear to be heard." Nathaniel nodded. "And you?" Claire looked toward the eastern corridor. "I have not decided whether I belong here." The answer hurt him, but he accepted it. "Then decide without me standing in your way." Claire studied his face, searching for the command hidden behind the words. There was none. Later that afternoon, as officials began restoring the identities and records of the Greyhaven women, Rebecca brought Claire a document recovered from Marcus's private files. It was not another complaint or authorization. It was a proposal written 3 years earlier for a permanent system that would give independent Omegas direct representation before the crown. The proposal had been rejected before Nathaniel ever saw it. At the bottom was the name of the woman who had written it, Helen Ward. Claire looked through the palace window toward Greyhaven in the distance and finally understood what came next. Exposing Marcus had uncovered the past. Now someone had to make sure the same silence could never be rebuilt. Claire returned to Greyhaven the following morning carrying Helen's rejected proposal. She found Helen in the community kitchen, pouring coffee as if the kingdom had not changed around her overnight. Claire placed the document on the table. Helen stared at her own name for a long moment. "I thought they destroyed this." "They buried it," Claire said. "There is a difference." Laura joined them as Claire explained what she wanted to do. The old proposal had asked for one representative appointed by the crown. Claire believed that was no longer enough. One person could be ignored, controlled, or replaced. She proposed an independent council with elected representatives from regional Omega communities, direct access to royal review, and a public system for tracking every complaint from submission to resolution. No letter could disappear without leaving evidence behind. Helen listened carefully. "And who leads it?" "The people it represents." 3 weeks later, delegates from across the kingdom gathered at Blackwood Palace. Nathaniel sat at the head of the chamber, but he did not introduce the proposal. Claire did. She stood before officials who once would have known her only as the Omega living near the royal wing and presented a system designed to survive beyond any individual king. Some council members resisted immediately. They argued that independent representation would complicate administration. Claire answered with 7 years of hidden complaints. Others claimed existing institutions could simply be improved. Laura asked why the people failed by those institutions should be required to trust them without oversight. The debate lasted nearly 6 hours. Nathaniel spoke only when his vote was required. By sunset, the council approved the independent Omega representation charter with a strong majority. The first representatives would be elected within 60 days. When nominations opened, Claire refused Nathaniel's suggestion that she accept an automatic leadership position. "If I am going to represent anyone, they should choose me," she told him. Nathaniel smiled slightly. "I thought you might say that." Claire returned to Greyhaven and campaigned like everyone else. She listened in kitchens, community halls, farms, and small businesses. She heard stories that had never reached Blackwood and promised only one thing. Every voice would leave a record that could not quietly disappear. When the results were announced, Claire was elected as the first chair of the new council. Helen became senior advisor, and Laura accepted responsibility for regional records oversight. The first official meeting took place 2 months after Claire had walked away from Blackwood in the middle of the night. Nathaniel attended as king, but Claire sat across from him rather than beside him. The distance between their chairs meant more to her than any royal title could have. They were finally meeting as two people with separate authority. Afterward, Nathaniel found her in the palace library. "You changed this place," he said. Claire closed the folder in front of her. "No. The people who kept speaking after no one listened changed it. I just helped open the door." Nathaniel looked toward the shelves. "I owe you an apology that has nothing to do with the sentence you overheard." Claire remained silent. I believe protecting you gave me the right to decide what you should know. I was wrong. You did misunderstand what I said that night, but I created the conditions that made the worst interpretation believable. Claire had waited months to hear those words, yet they did not bring the satisfaction she once imagined. They brought something quieter. Closure. Thank you, she said. Nathaniel nodded. He did not ask whether she forgave him. He did not ask whether she would return to the royal wing. He simply left her with the choice. Later that evening, Claire walked through the eastern corridor alone. The same doors stood before her. The same stone floor reflected the warm palace lights. But she was no longer the woman waiting outside a room to discover what powerful people had decided about her life. This time, when the council doors opened, officials stepped aside because Claire had business inside. As she crossed the threshold, she noticed Nathaniel watching from the far end of the corridor. He did not follow. He only smiled and continued walking in the opposite direction. Claire understood then that something between them had finally changed. Nathaniel was no longer trying to keep her safe by keeping her close. And for the first time, Claire could imagine choosing to come closer without losing herself. Months later, Blackwood Palace no longer felt like the place Claire had once escaped before dawn. The eastern corridor remained unchanged, but the decisions made behind its doors no longer disappeared into silence. Every complaint submitted through the new Representation Council received a public tracking number. Every regional office faced independent review. The women of Greyhaven had their legal records restored, and communities across the kingdom were beginning to send representatives of their own. Claire spent more time traveling than living anywhere permanently, yet whenever her work brought her back to Blackwood, Nathaniel welcomed her without assuming she would stay. That freedom changed something between them. One quiet evening after a long council session, Claire stepped onto the palace terrace and found Nathaniel looking across the gardens. "You disappeared before dinner," he said. Claire smiled. "I remember when leaving a room without informing you caused a royal investigation." Nathaniel almost laughed. "I deserve that." They stood together in comfortable silence. Months earlier, Claire would have searched every pause for hidden meaning. Now she simply waited until Nathaniel was ready to speak. "I used to believe being king meant having the answer before anyone asked the question," he said. "You taught me that sometimes leadership means being the last person to speak." Claire looked at him. "That sounds difficult for an alpha king." "Extremely." Her smile widened. Then Nathaniel became serious. "There is something I need to say, and I do not expect an answer tonight." Claire waited. "When you left, I thought my greatest mistake was failing to explain one conversation. It was not. My mistake was believing you would remain beside me simply because I had decided that was where you were safest." Claire felt the old memory return without its former power. The dark corridor. The silver badge. The road to Greyhaven. "I needed to leave," she said. "I know. Even if I had heard the entire sentence that night, eventually I would have needed to understand who I was outside these walls." Nathaniel nodded. "And now?" Claire looked through the open doors toward the palace behind them. "Now I know." Nathaniel did not ask her to explain. That was how she knew he had truly changed. The following morning, Claire completed her work and prepared to return to Greyhaven. At the palace entrance, Nathaniel handed her the silver badge she had left behind months earlier. Claire looked down at it. "I thought you kept this." "I did. Why give it back now?" Nathaniel closed her fingers around the badge. "Because it should never have meant that you belonged to Blackwood. It should only mean the door is open whenever you choose to walk through it." Claire felt emotion rise in her chest, quiet and unexpected. "And if I choose not to, then the door stays open." Nathaniel stepped back. No command. No expectation. Claire placed the badge in her coat pocket and left for Greyhaven. She returned to Blackwood 2 weeks later. Then again the following month. Each time, she came because she chose to. Slowly, without promises made from fear or gratitude, Claire and Nathaniel began building something neither of them had known how to create before. Trust without control. Protection without silence. Love without ownership. 1 year after the night Claire disappeared, she found herself standing again outside the Eastern Council chamber. Nathaniel approached from behind, but stopped several feet away. "Are you going in?" he asked. Claire looked at the doors that had once represented every decision made without her. Then she looked at the man who had finally learned not to make those decisions for her. She reached out her hand. Nathaniel took it, but he waited. Claire opened the doors herself. Together, They stepped inside. Not because a king had chosen an Omega. Not because an Omega had been rescued by a king. They walked forward because two people who had once mistaken protection for trust had learned that belonging could never be ordered, demanded, or assumed. It had to be chosen. And this time, Claire stayed because the choice was entirely hers.